Good evening. Thanks so much for joining.
We will get started shortly.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, how are you? Good evening.
I'm well. How are you and the lovely pumpkin?
Yeah, I had to give you a little cinnamon or spice today. How you doing,
Yeah,
Ebony?
I'm doing well. No complaints.
Excellent. Let me check to see if our colleagues are logging in. Oh, looks like we have Jamal. Hi, Jamal. How are you?
I am good. Good evening. Hey,
Good.
Ebony.
Hi, Jamal. Happy belated birthday again.
Thank you. Celebrating life because we only get one.
That's right.
You are definitely celebrating life, my brother. Skydiving. Awesome. You have to tell us about that experience. All right, welcome everyone. We'll be starting shortly. We are just looking for our final colleague to join us.
This is my first live, so I don't know if that means if I'm behind as a millennial or whatever, but thank you for inviting me to my first live.
Oh, we're so happy to have you.
No, this is my first multiple live. I've only done it one-on-one. So I love this.
Well, bear with me because I've only done a few of them. So we are all figuring it out together. Let's see if I can find Miss Arnwine. I don't see her just yet. If you all end up seeing her in the scrolling chat, let me know. But why don't we just go ahead and get started? So first off, I just want to say welcome and thank you to everyone who has joined us and tuned into the National Urban League's series, Justice Now. I'm Jerica Richardson, our Senior Vice President for Equitable Justice and Strategic Initiatives at the National Urban League. And I'm the host, the grateful host for this conversation. And I am so excited to be joined by my colleagues in the movement and in this work. Two very great civil rights leaders in their own rights. We have Jamal Watkins, who is a Senior Vice President of Strategy and Advancement at the National Urban League. Sorry, at the National NAACP. Forgive me. All the acronyms. And then we also have my sister in the struggle, Ebony Riley, who is the DC Bureau Chief for the National Action Network. So we're just so stoked to have the NAACP and NAN on with us to talk about a very important issue. I think you'd be hard pressed to turn on the television and not hear voting rights over and over and over again. And so, Jamal, can you start us off by kind of just unpacking it all and kind of giving the history of where we are? Because you turn on the television and folks say voting rights are being threatened. And we hear, if we look at data from the Brennan Center, that there are over 400 bills that have been introduced in 49 states, which is essentially the whole country, where we're seeing restrictive and repressive voting rights laws on the books popping up all over the place. And so my question to you is, President Biden called this 21st century Jim Crow. And we're seeing it all over again. Can you unpack the threat? What does it mean? And why is it happening?
No, thank you, Jerica, first and foremost to the National Urban League and my sister Ebony at the National Action Network. We know what fighting forward looks like in the Black community. and across this nation. And as you lift up what's happening with voting rights, it's very simple. When someone wants to win an election, there's only a couple of ways to win. You can get the majority of the votes, or you can make sure that folks who will vote against you stay at home. And so when we think about voter suppression, it usually is the latter, keeping folks at home who will vote a different way. And when we think about what has happened in 49 states and the massive amount of legislation that has been passed that's dubbed as suppressing the vote, it's because last year a whole lot of folks who look like the three of us turned out in city after city, community after community to cast an unfettered ballot, or they sent their ballot through the mail. They figured out how to participate and really turn the political tide. And so what you're seeing now is ridiculous laws being passed to make it harder for folks to want to even participate. So in Georgia, making it illegal for someone to give you bottled water while you're standing in a long line, the hours worth of standing, means it makes it harder for somebody to stand in line. I'm in line, it's hot, I'm thirsty, I can't break line to go get water, people can't bring me water. You're making it harder for me to vote. And so when we think about these erroneous laws, we know that the Voting Rights Act itself was designed to counter this type of suppression. And really what we're seeing right now is that act was broken, and there were sections of it valued. And so now that we have a new piece of legislation introduced today, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, it's actually to restore something that we actually won in 1965. So we basically that's something that they took from us. So when we start to think about what's happening right now with voter suppression, it really is about those that want to stay in power, doing whatever they can and passing laws to keep those of us who would vote them out to stay at home.
Thank you for that, Jamal. And thank you for lifting up the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. You know, I had the privilege of starting my career in public service off by working for Congressman Lewis. And I know how hard he worked and how hard so many of his peers of the day worked to get us to where we are today. And you're right. They are working strategically to roll it all back. It's as if once you figure out how to become an active participant in American democracy, then there's this effort afoot to prevent folks from actually doing that. And it's just shocking, especially if we've seen the gains and the record turnout from so many communities of color this last election cycle. And it's interesting, while I'm happy that the House introduced this legislation finally, although we know the three of us and our colleagues have been calling for it for quite some time. You know, it's the dead of summer and no one's paying attention. But I'm happy. I'm grateful that they've introduced it. But at the same time, I think we have Barbara joining us. Let me see. Maybe I missed that. But at the same time, we're watching the Senate. They went home. They went on vacation. When there is so much work, not only on the voting rights front, you know, Senator Schumer, you know, tried to bring it forth recently, but there was no movement. We know there's so much legislation that impacts all of us, and voting rights is critical to all that and pushing forward on so many different fronts. So the Senate went home. The House will likely take this up on the 23rd. Right. Ebony, can you talk to us a little bit about your efforts and the efforts of a lot of other groups that have been working with you all about the march that is going to be held on the 28th, and why it's important and what the purpose of the march is?
Absolutely. So first, let me thank you, Jerica, International Urban League, for having this conversation today. This is Jamal's wheelhouse. So I'm just honored to be in the same chat with him about this topic. I call it intersecting oppressions, right? When you talk about all of the things that are happening, keeping in mind that we did do the John Lewis intro today, but then tomorrow you have the 101st, right, anniversary of the 19th Amendment for women. So that's the anniversary tomorrow. So all of these different things are happening, but they all intersect. So we can go into that later about Black women and voting. Oh, I'll stop.
We will go right back to you, but I just wanted to say and introduce Barbara Arnwine, who is a legend in this work, in the fight for civil rights and voting rights. She is definitely the dean of this delegation that we have on right now. So, Barbara, thanks so much for joining us. To all the folks watching, Barbara is both the president and founder of the Transformative Justice Coalition. And we were just talking to Ebony about the march that's coming up. But I just want to point out for folks, Barbara and her team has been marching all across these United States this year, and will continue doing that work. And we'll turn to Barbara shortly, but just so happy to have you join us, Barbara.
Sorry about the delay.
No worries. We're just happy to have you. Back to the march.
No problem. So good. I just want to say hi. But I'll jump in for the March on for Voting Rights. It's taking place Saturday, August 28th. It's a mass mobilization to demand that elected officials protect democracy. Same thing, same echoing, the same themes all summer. Denounce voter suppression, and also make DC a state. We're also incorporating statehood. And so we want to make sure that this message is about ensuring a fair and easy access to the vote. It's led by several organizations. We have over 140 partners, including the NAACP and the Urban League. We're convening this with the Drum Major Institute, which is the only organization that was founded by Dr. King. And so that includes the president, which is Andrea King, and then the chairman, which is Martin Luther King III. Also, this group, March On, Future Coalition, SEIU, 51 for 51, and over 140 partners from across the country. We are not just in DC, but I'll talk about a little bit. We're gathering in DC at 8 a.m. at McPherson Square. We're marching past Black Lives Matter Plaza, past the White House, and we're going to end up on the mall, entering at around 12th Street and Madison Drive. So that's completely blocked off, and you'll see us there. In addition to that, there will be efforts in Texas, Arizona, Miami, New York, Atlanta, Georgia. So there's several cities, I believe it's more than 12 now, where we're all having this rally all at the same time. So we're looking forward to the participation, and we're encouraging folks to come out to lend their voices to the cause. And we want this to be led by the people. So we're excited to make sure that statehood is front and center in DC, and have those DC advocates that we work with to be able to lend their voice to the cause as well, to pass that federal legislation.
Thank you, Ebony, for all that information, and just thank you and to all of our colleagues at the National Action Network, because you all have been on the ground absolutely doing the work. We're talking voting rights this year, but last year we were saying get your knee off our necks, and you all have been leading the charge and just mobilizing so many of us. So we so appreciate you for your work. Barbara, earlier before you joined, Jamal kind of unpacked for us all that's happening across this country with these 400 restricted voting legislation bills across our states. Think we lost Jamal, popping him back in again. And really just the history, the throwback of what we've seen, all the way back to the Jim Crow era. And we've seen states really threatening our voting rights. But I want to turn to the Supreme Court, since we have such an astute legal mind on with you. And can you tell us a little bit about some of the recent decisions that have come out and how that is also a threat to our voting rights?
Well, the major case that came out this year, on July 1st, Congress was gone, because they didn't want to get denounced before Congress. The Supreme Court issued on the very last day it was in session, the Bronovich versus the Democratic National Committee case. And that case involved a challenge to two suppression laws in Arizona. One was out of precinct vote, so that if you voted in the wrong precinct, made same auditorium as your correct precinct, but nobody know, they would not count your ballot. It's not accountable for any purpose, for governor, for anything. It's just not. And people don't know that. And they don't. That they need to be in the correct. People were. It was estimated that over 1%, all blacks, all Latinos, all Asians, all Native Americans were banned, lost their votes because of this problem. There is the other challenge to what was called ballot collection. If you are Native American, live in Arizona, and you're Apache, you're Navajo, you know that the nearest the nearest voting center can be 5 hours from where you live. And there aren't, you don't have regular delivery for your mail. And so what people do is that they always find, they have one person who goes and picks up the mail at the post office that might be 5 hours away. They have, so they work and they would bring, when people would get their ballots, mail-in ballots, because of the polling sites being so far away, they mostly try to mail ballots and the post office and people distribute them. They collect them, they bring them back. But saying that wasn't being allowed because the Navajo vote in 2020 was decisive for how Arizona went. So the fear was the Navajos and the Native American population in Arizona voting in a way incumbent party in Arizona didn't like. And the Ninth Circuit said they the purpose of blocking Native Americans from voting. But the Supreme Court upheld that it was necessary to prevent voter fraud. Said it was necessary to that states could administer their elections they saw fit. And so what does that mean, people? Is that we got a whole lot of other out there, 400 already from Jamal in 48 states. We've already passed 30 of these bills in states. We're living like crazy. In fact, in Arizona, if you were following the news, lawsuit against 2 bills and all voter restrictions. So it means that we're going to have a hard fight in the courts, but at the same time, that ruling is very because it talks about how open the process is for voting and all these voting options. Well, we know that's interesting how they use this case. It's very as how it can be used because of some of the cases versus other states. So, but that's section the and there have been this tried to vote denial case and these 2 provisions. They did not apply it, they did not strike those bad law staff. So that was a major happening. The Bonta case, the California rule, and all kind of impact on the For the People Act. And that's why we want the For the People Act. The Bonta case was a challenge, the release of what's called Schedule A of the IRS filing that every nonprofit has to make to show how much money you get from your top donors and who they are. And we all do that. Every single one of us here have that requirement, and we all comply with it. And we do that for the IRS every year. Well, California said, well, in order to be renewed for your nonprofit status, you have to show each year that you also you have to file with them your Schedule A. So again, make sure that you weren't being overly controlled by one force or the other, and that you were being honest about where your money sources came from. Well, sadly, once again, the Supreme Court said no. They said, so we on the First Amendment, right? Okay? They have, even though it's legal for the IRS, but suddenly California's only asking for internal review by the Attorney Office. They don't publicize it. So it was just, but all the more reason why we so we can have mandatory disclosure of their money for elections, where they're getting their money, dark money, all this money that's flowing into elections. A lot of decisions happen for voters. So we need the 40 People Act, because it would set mandatory statewide for every state. So you got the same laws in California, etc., all over the country. And just want to make sure that people understand.
Barbara, thank you for all that background. I feel like I think we're hearing your audio is going a little bit in and out. So I just want to flag that for you. But it was really helpful to hear the history. I think if you stay right there, I think your audio sounded good right there at that point. But you really brought up an important piece that often gets overlooked when we think about our Native American brothers and sisters. When we talk about voting rights, we often look at it through the lens of Black people. But our Native American brothers and sisters, in many respects, actually had longer barriers to the ballot box than we did. So it is important that we all continue to work in coalition together. And the other point that you brought up is you kind of broke down the For the People Act for us. That, along with the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which we talked about earlier, is so critical to our ability to fight from a national level. It's important that we're able to litigate on the state and local level, but fighting from the national level is critical. And that's why we have this march on the 28th. But I want to turn to another issue that I think is in many ways holding us back. It's a dirty word, depending on who you talk to, but the filibuster. So I said it.
Yep.
And, you know, a lot of folks hear the term over and over again, but they're not quite sure how that relates to some of the roadblocks that we are seeing happen with respect to voting rights legislation, but quite frankly, with respect to anything that is beneficial to marginalized communities and people of color. Jamal, I feel like you are a filibuster expert. So can you start off our conversation on this topic and kind of just explain to all those that are tuned in about what the filibuster really is and how it is showing up in this fight for voting rights?
You know, I think as we look at the halls of Congress, we realize that rules have been built and created either to make sure that policies get passed in the right way or that policies don't get passed. And when I think about the filibuster, I recall a conversation I had with my grandmother, Bobby Jean Watkins. She's 85 years old. Now, she doesn't know all the nuances of the filibuster, but she broke it down to me and basically said, it sounds like this rule is in place and is used at times to prevent good policies from being passed because you need a certain number of senators to say yes. And I said, yeah, Grandma, that's literally what they're wrestling with. If you got to get 60 senators to agree on something in order for it to pass, in a partisan environment where Republicans and Democrats don't get along, they don't agree, so you got 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats, where are you going to get 10 people from the other side to break away and say, yes, let's do the right thing. We haven't seen that except for on some rare occasions. The irony that they were able to find a path forward around the infrastructure bill, it made sense because, hey, if you give folks money and jobs and reinvigorating the economy, Republicans and Democrats, yeah, you can see eye to eye on that. Why can't you see eye to eye on things like making it easier for eligible voters to be able to vote? Why can't you see eye to eye on policies that make it such that people have a livable wage and a living wage? We couldn't even get the group to come together to get to 60 to actually address policing and policing reform when we know the country was on fire last year because of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others. So when we think about the filibuster, it is a rule. And a rule, if the rule is in the way of good policy and good policy making, then what do? You get rid of the rule. And that's what we're actually fighting forward on, is if we can get 50 of the Democrats, and I'm saying this with my nonpartisan hat on, none of us here endorse candidates. We don't care who sits in the halls of Congress. We care about them doing the right thing. If we can't get 50 of the Democrats to agree that let's put this rule aside and do what's right for the American public, then we got a problem and a crisis. And that's why the march that's happening on the 28th, the work that we're doing this weekend around fighting and protecting our right to vote, the work that we're going to do in 2022, it's all rooted in this notion that when the rules start to be rigged against us, as they have been for many decades, then we got to actually say, let's unrig the rules. And the filibuster is one of those rules that right now is being used against us. Put it aside, put it aside, put it aside, and get the job done for the American public.
Oh, I love the ending. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know if we're supposed to wait till you call on us, but, okay. I wanted to add, at John Lewis's funeral, President Obama called the filibuster a Jim Crow relic. So just putting it aside, like he said, is the perfect way for folks to really grasp and understand why it's not needed. And as far as efforts go, I just want everyone watching to know so many groups have reached out. It's not like members and senators are unaware of the cost in this stake here. Every group you can think of from all demographics, intergenerational groups have reached out and said, hey, let us educate you. Here's the harms. Here's the future impact. And still, nothing has been really done. And the thing about the just voting rights or reauthorization piece, it's always been bipartisan. So it's not like it's something that's foreign. It's always been a way for both sides of the aisle to work to a compromise to fix this, right? So, this is a really peculiar time, and they're supposed to move the will of the people. And so we have to make them move the will of the people, or we move them. Jerica, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sorry, I put myself on mute to make sure everybody heard you loud and clear, and I heard you loud and clear. I will say that's the reason, we have to move them, but the people have been moving. We all have been protesting on a host of issues. We have been pushing and taking that protest, and we have turned it into power for our communities. And now we are demanding policy. That's what this is all about. I mean, and we really do need to follow through with the will of the people. Miss Arnwine, do you want to jump in?
Absolutely. On the filibuster, two things. It's not in the Constitution. People, it's law. This is just a tool that an informal, by the way, that the Senate followed. So people, I got to understand, talking about something that's not even in, that's been used our constitutional rights. I mean, how does that make sense? People don't know filibuster comes from a group of Confederates who very strong white supremacists who spent early years into Central South America trying to convince those nations to become white supremacist nations. That's who the filibuster were. And so that very origin of the term is segregationist in its origins. And we need to understand filibuster has been used over again to deny women, to deny blacks, to deny us our fundamental rights. My issue is, here's what we need. Not only do we need Joe Manchin and Senator Sinema to say that they will vote to end the filibuster, but we need Joe Biden to call for the repeal, to call for the reform, whatever, of the filibuster so it gets out the way. The fact that he hasn't said that loudly and publicly is a problem. And I mean, this is the reality. You got to show 10 Republican votes, or you show a way to end the filibuster from blocking this critical need for the People Act, whatever version you come up with, but the best version possible. And as they've already said, Mitch McConnell said he's going to vote against the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Haven't even seen a word of it at the time that he said that. So we know that this is opposition. We know they're not saying, shame on you, Texas, shame on you, Georgia, shame on you, Florida, for passing all these vicious voter suppression bills. We know that the GOP inside of the Senate is not even making one voice heard in dissent in favor of voters. So we know this is a critical moment in history. We can't be playing around. We can't be jiving around. We can't be talking about you got our backs, but you won't give us our votes. Oh, no. No way. So that's one reason why we're going to be in Washington on the 28th, of August. I will be at, the Lincoln Memorial. I'm going to be at the out there at the Blacksonian. I'm going to be everywhere because we have to demand our rights. That's why I've been going to jail. You think I like going to jail? You think I like being arrested? I'm a lawyer. That's the last thing, and my new nickname, but I listen. I've been all over the country demonstrating and will continue because until we have a real democracy, everything else is for naught. And they are intent on reversing what they said. They are intent on knocking out, as they said in Georgia, that the purpose of SB 202 was to knock out 20% of the black. And that is the same thing we saw in Arizona. They said the purpose of the new Arizona laws is to electorate. They mean this. And we're crazy if we think that these people are just, quote, mad, just, quote, playing games, just sitting around, coming up with some kind of things to make us angry. No, they are serious about denying us our votes, and we got to really fight.
And if I can add one more thing, that's why I really am also very with popcorn watching what our beloved sister, Assistant Attorney General AG Kristen Clark's going to do with the states. We didn't talk about the Justice Department and their ability to intervene, but I know as a voting rights advocate, she's going to sue, and this may be a little bit unprofessional, sue boots house down all of these states that have all of these issues, right? Because we really need all of this. We need pressure on every federal entity to utilize and maximize their authority on this issue. Like the people are moving. As Ms. Arnwine, she's been out there all summer. Groups have been out all summer. The people are clear what they want. Now we have to move the government to make sure that they're moving at what we want. So I just wanted to add the Justice Department in the conversation because they're also a tool that we can utilize.
And
But
great
Ebony,
point. I was just going to say that's a great point because we have so many tools at our disposal and we really need to activate and use them all. I think one of the points that really came to mind when I heard Barbara speaking is the motivation behind this. Not only, it's not just that they're unhappy, but they are moving strategically. And we have to do the same. And I say that because if we take a look at the census number and the data on race that just came out last week, that's the smoking gun. That's what's triggering all of this. When you see the numbers of people of color in this country rising, it makes a whole lot of folks uncomfortable. And I'm just going to drop that there and see who wants to chime in on that point.
You
Because we
know,
got to call a thing a thing. We're on IG Live, so we might as well be real frank about it. No need to
And people
sugarcoat
need
it.
to know. Absolutely.
and you know what I think, Jericho, what you're lifting up is that we knew the country was going to look more and more like us back in 2010 when the number of births of people of color children outpaced the number of births of white children. It was very clear. The data said in 2010, wait a minute, people of color are about to be the majority by 2044, 2050. And there's a group of people who saw that data and said, okay, we got to get into action because I want to make sure that I stay in power and that those other folks who are being born at a higher rate than us don't actually become the political power and take over this country, even though it's their country, meaning it's folks who are born in the United States who look like us who are going to be the majority. The other reality that is also crystal clear from the data is that in states like Arizona, if it weren't for Black and brown voters, there would be no Senator Sinema, there would be no Senator Kelly. So when you start to look at some of these states, the data says, wait a minute, by 2022, by 2024, the voting base, the folks who, again, look like us, are going to start to outnumber other communities. And the question becomes, what have you done for us lately? Or what have you done for us, period? So when we're talking about this thing called voting rights and the fight forward, every single senator is looking at the data. Some know that their time has been up and that they actually got to play with us in the right way. Others, they're holding on, and they know that in their states, it's going to take, another 15, 20 years before people of color become a bigger voting bloc, but the inevitable is happening, and that's why you're seeing, by hook or crook, they're going to do whatever they can to suppress the vote. They're going to do whatever they can to make it feel like we shouldn't come out, it's not worth our time. But that's why in this moment of folks getting arrested, folks being active, we're saying also call your senator. And I don't care if your senator is Raphael Warnock. Call him and say, bless you, brother. Thank you for fighting. I stand with you. Go on record, because if we don't continue to push during these moments, then we're going to lose out. And when the elections happen, it's going to be worse for us. So I would argue the demographics are in our favor. We saw what happened in Georgia. We saw what happened in state after state, but we got to keep the pressure on. We got to keep the heat on. And that means not letting not a single senator, whether you're in Alaska or Maine or Utah, off the hook, because demographics is only destiny when we actually motivate and organize those folks to participate.
Fact.
And and this this is all about demos, right? Demos is the Latin root meaning the people. So it's either the government of the people or the characteristics of the people, or demographics. What we are seeing, that there's a lie. The big lie, of course, is Trump won the election somehow, despite all the contrary, all the lawsuits, all the lack of any proof of such a lie being true. Other lie. There's a more fundamental lie that makes that lie possible, and that's the belief that America's a white nation. And some people really believe that. They generally have a white supremacist viewpoint, and when they see everybody else, they see all the rest of us as interlopers in the democracy and not as full participants. They have no commitment to a multiracial democracy, which is what this nation has to becoming. And without a robust, inclusive, multiracial democracy, there is no future for this country. They are willing to throw democracy to the winds. They are willing to go into any other kind of ruling mechanism, but not to include people of color. So part of our charge is uniting all of us, all of the many groups. There's so many demographics that are just not racial, that are political, that are commitments and others, where we can come together and keep building and making real this multiracial democracy. And that means cinema. That means, Mansion, you got to do your job. We're not going to sit back and just allow you to hide behind some little fantasy fiction about bipartisanship, some kind of fiction about there's going to be, quote, chaos. What do you think's going on now with all these people not able to vote and fearing for their vote, having all this confusion? You think that's chaos? I mean, listen, it's time for us to really demand that we are able to pass, put into law the For the People Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, PC stated.
When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like, oppression. And I see insurrection here on that little blurb for Urban League. So it takes me back to January 6th. Every time we have progress, there's a pushback. So
Yeah.
Underscoring all your points. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
Well said. And I just thank you all so much for joining it with us in this conversation. I also think it's important that anytime we have this conversation, that we leave people with notes and action steps that they can do to get involved and do the work and be involved from whatever seat they sit in. And so before we close, I want to give you each just a moment to share a final thought, final word, or lift up anything that your organization is currently doing in this space. I think the one thing that we can all attest to is this is urgent. We have to get this done, and we have to fight to protect our voting rights now, because 2022 is right around the corner. Jamal, you want to give us a final word, some final thoughts?
Yes, first and foremost, Jerica and team, I want to lift up a few things. One is that we're going to continue to trust Black women. So you see in this Zoom, I am outnumbered by the brilliance of Black women here, and understand that in our community is rooted in excellence. So I'm grateful to see Leader Richardson, Leader Arnwine, and Leader Riley literally showing the best of excellence in our community. The second thing is that we are married to this struggle, whether you are with the Urban League, the Transformative Justice Coalition, National Action Network, the Divine Nine, the AME, CME, whoever you are, if you are a part of our community, this is your fight. This is your moment. And the third piece is to lift up that we are fighting in the same direction. And so we are pushing every single senator and every single congressional leader, every governor, state leg and state senate leader to actually do the right thing, because at the end of the day, elections come around. They keep coming. And so if we don't see action from them, we will have to vote them out and vote in the right leadership. And so I really want to say thank you to this space, and continue to get involved. Visit our websites. If you don't want to march, if you don't want to show up to a rally, you can actually text, you can call your senator, you can go on social media, but get your name on the record. Because at the end of the day, as Ebony pointed out, the thing that we're dealing with is white supremacy and white privilege. And we begin to call that out, and we begin to demand what we want as voters and as community members. That's how we'll continue to make change happen. So thank you for this space.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbara?
Yes. My note to everybody is that we create conditions for our equality. We create the conditions for our victory. We anybody else. Conventional, go back and look at all your newspapers. June 16th, roughly around that time. What were they saying? They were saying that the For the People Act was dead. They were saying that voting rights for 2020 was dead. They were saying, forget about it. No John Lewis Voting Advancement Act. Nothing's going to happen. The only reason why there's even talk about the only reason why Schumer's saying he's going to have a vote, the reason why Pelosi's got the House coming back in next week, we're saying the Senate needs to be back too. Stop playing around, get back here, job. We're, the only reason any of those conditions exist is because of us, because we've been taking the fight to the streets, because we were willing to, because we showed Senate. We went into that heart bill with Congresswoman Bates, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. We went in there were at least 4 staffers who came out. Do you think that's no fact? They were telling their folks that we know one thing, where Black women aren't having it. They're demanding that we do better. And so that's the reality. I have watched media. Stay tuned. Look at the last week of coverage on this issue. It's all about why isn't Biden doing more? Why isn't the Senate, passing this legislation? We have moved, continue to move until we get what we want. Nothing short of a full, multi-racial, robust democracy will do. And
Hear,
you can
hear
go
to that.
for information.
Barbara, do you mind dropping that in the chat, in the comments, the information? Because you cut out a little bit, and I want to make sure our folks leave with that information. And Sister Ebony, I turn it over to you. Final thoughts.
Well, you know what? I like to add information so I won't be repetitive. So I'm going to, first of all, thank you all for this conference. I am also going to lift up and underscore the leadership of Black women, but also Black men who are also supporting the efforts of this is a community effort. So I want to make sure that I recognize the work that our Black men do as well. And thank you for supporting us and all of that. I appreciate everything that's been said tonight. What I want to say, first of all, let me just get the little plug out the way. More information about the March 28th, specifically meeting at McPherson Square at 8 a.m. Go to nationalactionnetwork.net. There's other websites as well with our coalition members, but that's the easiest one I can give you at the moment. I want to talk about engagement. I walked into the movement backwards. I'm an everyday person. I don't know how I got here. I care about our people, right? So I want to talk to them. I want to make sure that we understand that our young people who marched last year, this year is just as important as the march last year. I want to make sure that juniors in high school and those who are seniors this year are understanding that they're about to be voters and what that looks like. I want to make sure our young people who may be in community college or a part of Me Five Me, those every day just understand matter, this movement, all of the words that are connected to their day-to-day existence. So engagement for me is the missing piece that I want to make sure while we're telling the senators and electeds in this fight in the streets, we make sure we tell people who are looking at us that may not understand why we're in the street and how they should be in the street with us, bringing them along with us, pulling them into the message, into the fold. Reach one, each one, and teach one. It still applies today. So our young people, I'm a millennial, but I have a lot of young people under me, and I just want to make sure they understand that they're the next voter. And this is, as they're taking critical race theory out of schools, this is why they're taking it out of schools. They don't want you to know yourself because they don't want you to know your power. Where's your power? Your power is in your vote. What's your vote connected to? Here are all these issues. So there's an opportunity here to also make this a teachable engagement moment. So I just want us to also engage, those who are not connected to organizations. Make sure we reach out to those who are not and just give them that information. That's why we're here, to spread it in the community. So that's my piece from here. And so thank you so much for this conversation tonight.
And
thank you.
Jerica,
and you're right. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wanted to mention one thing about our young people. There is a march after the march on the 29th at 8:00 from Howard University. There is a live movement, which of all the students from the HB are marching on the Department of Education from 1 o'clock until 3, and around 3 o'clock, 4 at the Department of Education. So people are moving. They're not sitting back. They're making demands. And so immense for young Black students and students of color. So they're raising it. So I want everybody to know that just like we're going to support everything on the August the 28th, we're going to be out there supporting our young people on the 29th.
Please share that information. I want to make sure people have that for sure, because I'm going to amplify that as well.
Absolutely. The live movement.
Absolutely. So what I heard was the August 29th. And Barbara, if you can drop that in the chat, that would be great. I I just want to echo what you all have said and just thank you for participating in this conversation. It's so critical. We know we do this work day in and day out, but it's important because it impacts all of us. And the point about young people, you know, I'm a millennial too. Ebony, shout out to millennials, but also shout out to all those that are coming behind us. I remember what it was like to be a young person on a college campus. The reason I'm in this job today is because I was disenfranchised in the year 2000 when I was a freshman at Spelman College. Working with the NAACP to sign up people, I saw folks that had registered in the community, but by happenstance, all these Black college students with these HBCU addresses showed up to the polls and our names weren't on the list. So it's real. We have to be at the table. We have to keep the pressure on. And no matter what age you are, you have to be involved. Because if you're not, we're on the menu. And so I know what it's like to be on the menu and be frustrated and hurt and feel like my voice didn't, count, ripping up notebook paper in the year 2000 and writing the presidential candidate of my choice because they didn't have provisional ballots in Georgia back then. We had to fight for every single thing we got. But the only way we get there is if we continue to work together. So I am so appreciative of all of you for being my partners, my colleagues, soldiers, kings, queens, and everything in this movement. This work is so important. And we're just so encouraged by what we're seeing with our young people. Really, this is a continuation of the work that has been started. The civil rights movement has never ended. We just keep adding new generations to the fold.
That's right.
So thanks to all of you. I encourage you to show up to the march, participate with any of our organizations in some way, shape, or form on the 28th and beyond. This work is just beginning. Until next time, remember, the time for justice is always now. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Magnificent.
Wonderful. Thank you. Take
Take
care,
care.
everyone. Stay well.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.